Cody Garbrandt's fall from grace has been such an unexpected event that's spanning past 4 years ever since the loss to his former rival, TJ Dillashaw, which started it all off, man. If you remember the time when the young 25-year-old undefeated alpha male prodigy beat the greatest bantamweight of all time to finally fulfill that Team Alpha Male prophecy, Cody Garbrandt was plastered everywhere. He was on commercials, he was on every promo, he was deemed a future star of the sport, he won the Breakthrough Fighter of the Year for the 2017 MMA Awards. The fans couldn't get enough of him, his Instagram following went crazy, and he even got the strange YouTube fantasy matchup treatment, getting millions of views just from people wondering how he could beat Conor McGregor in a fight. Cody was everywhere, and not only did he have the look and the heated charisma of someone that the UFC was waiting for to build a division that had a bunch of promising future talent with brewing rivalries, but the fans also quickly chalked him up as one of the best pure raw talents we've ever seen. The guy had incredibly powerful boxing skills, an underrated takedown game, even able to take down Dominic Cruz, and he also has smooth and flashy striking defense, all backed up by his superior athleticism. He was powerful, he was fast, he had cardio, he had the technique, and he had the athleticism. It seemed as though Cody Garbrandt had everything built in to be an unstoppable force in that bantamweight division, and some even contemplating him going up to 145 and doing great things there as well. Even the viral moments of him blowing up in these temper tantrums against Dominic Cruz, against TJ Dillashaw, and even against the biggest star in the sport, it hinted that he may be mentally unstable to be consistent on top. He seemingly proved everyone wrong when he went up against the longtime champion, greatest bantamweight of all time, Dominic Cruz. And not only did he beat him technically from pillar to post, and he stayed composed. The performance was so great that analysts, experts, other fighters, and media all deemed it as one of the best performances from a challenger in UFC history. It seemed like all of the theories that he may be too mentally unstable, he might not be able to fight calmly, and put himself in trouble in a fight were all thrown out the window. At that moment, everybody believed Cody Garbrandt was the future star of the sport. Fans were hoping that this was Cody Garbrandt's beginning of realizing his skills and potential, and hoping that it wasn't just a one-off big moment that he was built up for years to have. And the latter happened. The undefeated Cody Garbrandt went from compiling 11 wins in a row, becoming one of the youngest champions in UFC history, to losing 5 of his next 6 fights. The time he had to prove himself, he ultimately failed miserably. 4 of those 5 losses were by knockout, and a quick huge following that Cody garnered ever since his championship win seemed extremely disappointed in his performances of not realizing the potential everyone saw 5 years ago. It seemed as though Cody Garbrandt was trained specifically to target the long-reigning champion, who dominated the prolific gym for the 135-pound fighters, Team Alpha Male. Team Alpha Male was always known to have the best bantamweights in the world, from Uriah Faber to TJ Dillashaw to Cody Garbrandt to Joseph Benavidez, etc., etc. And Cody Garbrandt was deemed the true prodigy of the gym. He was going to be the guy to finally get one over on Dominic Cruz where everybody else failed. And at the end of the day, Cody may have been too focused on defeating one specific opponent rather than defeating everyone. Because if you remember Cody's opponents outside of Cruz, he never fought a top 5 fighter before. He was rushed quickly to a title shot after beating number 7 Thomas Almeida and number 8 Takeya Mizugaki, both fighters who shortly after went on losing streaks and either retiring from the sport or getting kicked out of the UFC. Dominic Cruz was the sole opponent that Cody was prepared for ever since he stepped into Team Alpha Male, and he fulfilled that prophecy by beating Cruz. He did what he was prepared to do. What happened afterward was that for the first time, Cody had to fight others who he was not readily long prepared for, besides the caveat of longtime former Team Alpha Male fighter TJ Dillashaw, because TJ Dillashaw was someone he was familiar with, sparring and training with him for years. And it's a reason why he ultimately didn't perform too badly, even though he suffered 2 TKO losses to him. They were both quite competitive fights, but after those losses, a big question got brought up about Cody's ability to be great. And it wasn't technical. Those times that he had those temper tantrums back in the day got brought up again against him, because he seemed to have gotten emotional against TJ. Was Cody just simply too emotional to progress? Was he in fact too hot-headed to be consistent on top? His next fight seemed to have confirmed this. He suffered a horrendous knockout loss by the hands of Pedro Munoz, where he was actually performing amazingly in. Technically, he seemed to be superior to Munoz, but again, he lost composure from an accidental headbutt, and he started to brawl with a durable, heavy-handed Brazilian. He was able to pause this losing streak by beating a 38-year-old declining longtime bantamweight Rafael Sunsao, and the hype riled up again as Cody seemed to have calmed his mental state to allow him to fight clearly. From one win, he got thrown up against top-ranked contender Rob Font, which showed that there's more holes to Cody Garbrandt than just his ability to fight calmly. The strongest aspect of Cody Garbrandt's game was demoralized when Rob Font outboxed him for 5 rounds. After winning 1 fight in his last 5, Cody wanted a fresh start at the flyweight division because he thought himself as too small for the bantamweights. So attempting to use his size against his smaller opponents, he suffered yet again another knockout loss to flyweight contender Kai Kara France. And now Cody Garbrandt stands as a fighter who is struggling to beat any ranked opponent. He is young enough still to where the UFC can build him up fresh by going back to him fighting unranked fighters. And then if he wins, go up the ranks slowly, and sometimes a fall to be grounded is something that a fighter needs in order to reach that next peak. From the fans' perspective, it looks like the days of Cody Garbrandt being that superstar in the sport, realizing his potential, seems to be somewhat of a fantasy, but hopefully Cody is able to turn things around.